attention to the spaceship because obviously, as a young brown nerd, it was a prerequisite for us to enjoy Star Trek, to love Star Trek. It's basically one of our love languages. You know what I mean? And that brings me to I brought a prop, a real life thing. This I will put on really quickly. This is something that I have owned since I was maybe 10 years old. My best friend's mom made it for me when I was a kid, and I brought it from Canada, and yes, it is a homemade Star Trek uniform. Yeah, so I'm gonna wear it today. I bet you thought that this was like the uniform, but no, this is what I'm gonna wear, and I'm proud to. All right, so I'm gonna put the t-shirt on, did that. Can anyone relate? I just want to scan the room really quickly for some Star Trek fans. Yes? Yes! My people! All right, just quick poll. Kirk? Kirk fans? Picard? Yeah! Cisco? Janeway? Yeah! Archer? That was a test. All right. So, okay, now, if you're not into Star Trek, saws, but hopefully you'll find this entertaining. And if you're more of a Star Wars fan, don't worry, I'll be explaining all the big words. All right. I can't believe that I threw this together, and I don't know, this is I put this together so quickly, I really apologize. But technically, I've been preparing for this, talking to a whole group of people, a captive audience about Star Trek. I have been preparing for this my whole damn life. I only have 20 minutes. Yeah, right. All right. So let's move on. Let's hopefully make sure we got the slides going in the right direction. We got the tribbles. Okay, so they say that people who love science fiction are bored with reality. And they have sort of idyllic hopes for the future. Of course, growing up, I was idyllic about not having the surface-to-body hair ratio of a small alien creature. But Star Trek, after all, presented us with, possibilities of what could be. First of all, the first interracial kiss on North American television was actually on Star Trek. Yes. And that, of course, made me hopeful as a young, isolated minority on the east coast of Canada that maybe one day a white boy would also one day kiss me. Besides from my cousins who always wanted to practice. Anyway, we're here to talk about my love of science fiction. And for a lot of people, I feel like sci-fi is actually their first introduction into science itself. And I love just how science was presented with possibilities in Star Trek and the scope of it. And I found that as my knowledge grew about science, there was more of a feedback appreciation back into Star Trek. And I'll just quickly embarrass Wade because he told me that the blurb that I wrote for the show was actually kind of vague. And that was intentional because the greatness of Star Trek cannot be contained to a single discipline. Physics, geology, futurism, evolutionary science, chemistry, the list goes on. So where do I begin? Well, first of all, I was obsessed with the idea that science fiction could become reality. That imagination comes first, and it influences the minds of our young creators, and then shapes the world as we know it. Cell phones, everyone talks about mobile communicators in the original series, very similar to our flip phones, but also sliding doors, personal computers, portable memory, wireless earpieces, tablets, and miniskirts on men, all seen first on Star Trek. Okay, so what does it mean for technology in our near future? Replicators, are they not somewhat similar to 3D printers? A little primitive early technology there. Of course, we have Picard ordering his favorite. Anyone want to shout? Tea Earl Grey hot. I always wondered, why specify hot? You know, like just once, wasn't the computer just go, I'm a bloody computer, I know you want your tea hot. Anyway, and of course, we've got right here, Wesley Crusher. And where is he? The holodeck. And already today, the holodeck, for the uninitiated, a recreational room that creates a virtual environment. And it's already starting to influence the VR and the AR technology that we have today. And it's pushing people to the limits of what our capabilities are. And in fact, there are many labs that are working on creating more of an integrative VR experience. There is a Cave 2 at the University of Chicago. Pardon? You got something to say? Look, I could talk all day. All right, I really could. Anyway, Wesley Crusher, another white boy who could possibly kiss you. But, you know, if you were like a older, like, you know, lonely housewife who was into white wine, maybe you'd be more into Riker. You know, he was the cheeky, dashing one, the Han Solo of the crew. But if you had any taste at all, you'd go after Data, the android. Woo, that's right. The best one because he was the whitest of them all. I really so wish that I had a picture of this essay that I wrote back in, it was junior high. I was like year 7. And I was supposed to write an essay about who I admired most. And I actually wrote my essay on Lieutenant Commander Data from Star Trek The Next Generation. And I was being facetious at the time, but I was also trying to prove a point about how society would be better if we were all less emotional and strive to understand human nature better. Anyway, now, I do want to talk about specific episodes that sparked my brain as a young child. So I'm going to go all the way back to the original series, Season 1, Episode 18. Does anyone remember The Arena? No. Yes, the Arena episode. That's when our hero, Captain Kirk, James Tiberius Kirk, is marooned on a planet with a Gorn. Okay. Yeah, pardon? Gorn, exactly. Are you making fun of my accent? Oh, it's coming up nerd night. I thought you said you were going to handle hecklers, Wade. No, I can take it. All right, anyway, a Gorn. Now, what's a Gorn? A super jacked alien lizard. Now, who wants to aggressively mate with Captain Kirk? Kirk doesn't stand a chance because the Gorn is so strong. So what does he do? I'll tell you what he does. The planet is rich in resources, so he scavenges the surface for the real ingredients to make gunpowder. He's got it all: potassium nitrate, sulfur, and charcoal. Then he constructs a bloody diamond cannon with a piece of bamboo, and he uses it to incapacitate the Gorn. Okay. But he actually doesn't kill him because at that moment, he realizes they are in love and they cry and embrace each other. Now, I'm like, I get it. Like, you know, it's like, it doesn't actually talk about, you know, the proportions to make gunpowder because it's not safe. And, you know, and they actually busted this myth on Mythbusters. But to me, that episode, which is used the real components of gunpowder, that was my first exposure to chemistry. Real chemistry and also romantic. And of course, Kirk and the Gorn are very happy still to this day. And by the way, that myth was busted because they didn't replicate the experiment correctly. They failed to use alien world charcoal and bamboo, which would have released the necessary energy and sustained the blast. Come at me. All right. So as I got older, like I said, I started to appreciate all these little sort of subtle nods to real science. Of course, that brings me to one of my favorite things, the transporter, which I included because this is, again, from the Kardashian show, because, yes, that's me in the back, beaming away. Now, Why do I include the transporter in the talk? Well, here's the thing. For people who don't know, transporters dematerialize you and then rematerialize you somewhere else. And here's that subtle nod to science that I just love. Does anyone remember transporters have a little mechanism called the Heisenberg compensator that they make reference to? Yes. And for those of you who don't know, the Heisenberg uncertainty principle states that you can't know the position and the velocity of an object simultaneously. So, of course, if you were going to dematerialize, you would need something to compensate for that quantum principle. Am I right? So, yeah, I just loved it. I really do. Okay, another episode that I really enjoyed takes us 30,000 light years across the galaxy to, well, the Delta Quadrant. Yeah, the Delta Quadrant, where the crew of the USS Voyager are stranded on the other side of the galaxy, far from home. It was the premise of the whole show. Now, in this episode, two Voth scientists find human remains and part of a uniform. On a planet. There they are, finding the uniform, and finding the human remains. Now, one of the scientists is desperate to prove theories about the origin of his own race. Now, first of all, whose bones did they find? And I have to bring this up because I made this slide last night and I thought it was hilarious. They found the bones of this guy. Who was killed about a season earlier by getting eaten by a Hanonian land eel, which happens. But he's just another white boy I won't get to kiss. By the way, doesn't his birth death look like a phone number? Anyway, coming up next is an artist's rendition of his death, but I added the sword. So, the aliens board Voyager. They track down Voyager from the fragment of the uniform, and they're secretly studying them because they're like wearing personal cloaking devices, so they can't be seen. But of course, the Voyager crew are super sharp and smart, and they realize that someone's on board, and they manage to uncover them. And one of the aliens escapes, they can't communicate, and the other alien gets captured, and he goes into a protective hibernation. And that's when the doctor runs a scan, and he realizes that the alien that they've captured has 47 genetic markers found in human DNA. And then they're like, what? How is this possible? We're so far from Earth. How does this alien have DNA that is common to us? And then they go through it and they're like, this alien has genetic markers that are found in hundreds of Earth species that go back tens of millions of years. Oh my God, I'm at the 2-minute mark. All right, tens of millions of years. So then they ask each other, could this species have evolved on Earth? How do we solve this mystery? I'll tell you how. You go to the holodeck. All right, so they go to the holodeck, and they bring up the last common ancestor of mammals and reptiles, which is this guy. And they go to, first of all, the creators of this episode go to a real evolutionary biologist to help reconstruct this thing, which I think is really cool. And then they argue. They go, hey, what is the most evolved creature that could have come from that? Most evolved cold-blooded creature. And they get to the hadrosaur. And the hadrosaur apparently was wiped out during the last mass extinction. Or was it? Or was it? And then they look at it and they're like, what if it continued to evolve? And the doctor's like, yeah, it certainly has all the building blocks for a superior species. It's already bipedal with grasping hands. So they argue, what if it continued to evolve for millions and millions of years? What would we get? And of course, they run a, what's it called? I love this. A genome projection algorithm, another convenient thing that they invent. And they get this guy, a holographic projection that is eerily similar to the alien that is sleeping in sick bay. And then that's when the doctor misses the prime opportunity to say, that creature napping in sick bay is a spaceman dinosaur. That episode had it all for me. You know, it had genetics, paleontology, evolutionary biology, and the idea that dinosaurs kept evolving. So good. Of course, there's an alternative theory, and it would be this. Anyway, look, I get it. I'm at time. What do I do? I'll look. Wait, what do I do? All right, look, okay, we're almost done. All right, I'll admit it. There's a lot of fanciful science in Star Trek. For example, what's a deflector What's a deflector shield, and how do they, what's the word? Work. You know, what do? They protect the ship, they enhance subspace communications, they open temporal distortions. I think they mostly work as plot devices. But is there anything a deflector shield can't do? Yeah, grow hair. Here's another thing, phasers. Okay, what's a phaser? A theoretical particle weapon that can disrupt matter. Some scientists argue it could be a plasma beam that's directed by electromagnetic fields. But the Star Trek handbook says that the particles free the nuclear force of atoms, which of course means every phaser would cause a nuclear explosion. So that's obviously junk. I get it. And by the way, that's not how you hold a phaser, Deanna. This is how you hold a phaser like you mean it. Now, warp drive. Warp drive, if you're not familiar, is how they all get around space. And I won't go into the physics of warp, except that the idea was that they would create enough energy to warp space and time around the ship to create propulsion. Now, I don't want to talk about that. What I really want to talk about is how in season 7, that's warp, in season 7, they realized that their old trusty warp engine was actually destroying the fabric of subspace. And that I loved, because it was a real-world allegory to how human technology can often destroy our natural world. So I was like, Star Trek, you did it again. So I'm a dorky environmentalist who, recycles clothing until the end of death. Pardon? I just feel like there's a lot of feedback from the crowd. All right, anyway, I'll finish up. Death progress units. All right. I'm going to end with something that's a little bit more real world, because Star Trek is actually, 250 years in the future, and it's an argument of what's possible for our world. Is it possible 250 years from now? Could that be? Could we really have that? Well, maybe. 250 years ago, we were getting around in different kinds of ships. And if you were actually going to take someone from the past, 250 plus years, and bring them forward to our time, the level of progress and the society that we have would actually be so overwhelming, it would have the potential to kill that person. They would be so shocked by our technology and our world, it could kill them. But here's the thing. If that same person from the past, wanted to have the same effect on someone from their past, they couldn't go back the equivalent amount of time. They would have to go back almost 10,000 years before the agricultural revolution and blow someone's mind with how we, tilled the land. And if that primitive person wanted to have the same effect on someone else in his past, they would have to go back 100,000 years before they discovered fire and language. So what this is demonstrating is the law of accelerating returns. Advanced societies progress faster because they are more advanced. So based on this, that means for us, our next death progress unit could actually be just a few decades. And there are some scientists who predict that the world that we could potentially have in 2050 could be vastly different than the world that we live in today. So who knows, guys? Maybe we're not that far away from a time when a young brown nerd can take her android boyfriend to the prom. I don't know. But thank you for listening. Sorry for going over. Have a nice night.
Go to nerdnite.com to find a Nerd Night event near you. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for our latest presentation.